Hello, my friend. The world of magic, filled with legends and ancient tales, is opening its gates once again. Tonight, in the Gryffindor dormitory by the crackling fireplace, I will share another story with my friends. Join us, for the magic is about to come alive.
The winter evening had settled gently over London, laying its soft gray fingers across the old stone of the Ministry of Magic. From the highest window of her office, Hermione Granger watched the lamps flicker to life below, rows of golden orbs glowing against the mist. Papers rustled on her desk, and the scent of ink and old parchment hung faintly in the air. It had been nearly a decade since the Battle of Hogwarts, and though the scars of that terrible night had long faded from the castle walls, they lingered still in memory. The world was quieter now, steadier, yet in moments like this, Hermione sometimes felt a faint unease, a whisper that the peace they had fought for was not yet complete. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. "Come in," she called. The door creaked open, and Neville Longbottom stepped inside, his cloak damp from the drizzle outside. He looked older, more confident than the shy boy she once knew, though his kind eyes hadn't changed. "Hermione," he said, brushing water from his sleeves, "I thought you might want to see this before morning." He held out a small, silvery object wrapped in cloth. She took it carefully. When she unwrapped the fabric, her breath caught. Inside lay a pendant, round and gleaming faintly even in the dim light. It was old, clearly ancient, etched with a spiral of vines that wound around a tiny emblem of a badger. "That emblem," she whispered. "Helga Hufflepuff." Neville nodded. "Found it last week in a chest at the edge of the Forbidden Forest. Professor Sprout said it must have been lost for centuries. But then strange things started happening. Plants growing wildly overnight. Students hearing voices in their sleep. I brought it straight here when one of the first years fainted after touching it." Hermione frowned and turned the pendant over in her hand. The metal pulsed faintly beneath her fingers, warm, almost alive. "Did you run any detection charms?" "I did, and I swear, Hermione, it's like it's listening." That word sent a shiver through her. Listening. She laid the pendant carefully on her desk, murmuring a containment charm that shimmered like a faint veil of light. Then she looked up at him. "You did right to bring it here. I'll have it examined in the morning. If it's truly one of Hufflepuff's relics, it could be part of the old founder's enchantments. There's no telling what kind of magic still clings to it." Neville nodded, relief softening his features. "I'll head back to Hogwarts tonight then. The term's just started and Sprout's already missing me." Hermione smiled faintly. "Tell her I said hello." When he left, the office grew quiet again. Only the faint ticking of the clock filled the space. Hermione stared at the pendant, its surface now dark and still. She thought of the stories told about Hufflepuff's treasures, relics said to hold kindness and balance, not danger. But there had always been something mysterious about the founder's magic. Ancient spells tended to twist over time, warping into things even their makers wouldn't recognize. With a sigh, she rose and placed the pendant into a sealed glass case, warded it twice over, and dimmed the lights. She meant to leave, but as she reached for her cloak, a soft hum filled the room. Faint at first, then growing. The pendant was glowing. Hermione turned sharply. The glass case vibrated, the air thick with static. She drew her wand, stepping closer. The spiral of vines on the pendant began to move, slowly unfurling like real tendrils reaching outward. Then, with a sound like a sigh, the light faded, leaving the office dark and still once more. She stood there for a long moment, wand raised, heart pounding, but nothing more happened. Eventually she muttered a reinforcing charm and left. Down in the atrium, the ministry's great golden fountain shimmered in the lamplight, its statues reflected in the polished floor. Hermione walked briskly toward the fireplaces, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something had begun, something that would not stay quietly locked away. When she arrived home, the small sitting room in her London flat felt unusually still. A clock ticked softly on the mantel. Books lay stacked neatly beside an armchair. Everything was as it should be. Yet that night, Hermione dreamed. In her dream, she stood in the middle of an endless field of sunlit flowers. A woman with kind eyes and golden hair stood before her, holding the same pendant in her palm. "Magic is a gift," the woman said, "but gifts must be given freely." Before Hermione could answer, the flowers began to wither, and the woman's face grew distant, fading into shadow. A whisper followed, curling through the dream like smoke. "Find the balance, Hermione Granger, before it finds you." She woke with a start, breath quick and heart hammering. The early light of dawn slipped through the curtains. It was only a dream, she told herself. Yet when she went to the ministry that morning, she found her office in disarray, papers scattered, the containment case shattered, and the pendant gone. Something had stolen it in the night, and Hermione Granger, though she did not yet know it, was about to embark on one of the most perilous adventures of her life. One that would test not her intellect alone, but her heart. The morning that followed was pale and cold, the sky still heavy with mist. Hermione stood in the doorway of her office, wand drawn, her eyes sweeping over the wreckage. The scent of singed parchment lingered in the air. Shelves had been overturned, scrolls torn open, and the glass case that had held the pendant lay shattered in glittering shards across the floor. The wards she'd placed, ancient protective charms drawn from the restricted section at Hogwarts itself, had been dismantled, not broken. Whoever had taken the pendant had done so with precision and understanding. Not many could undo those spells, Hermione murmured under her breath. A low voice answered from behind her. No, not many at all. She turned sharply to find Harry Potter standing in the doorway, his green eyes serious, his cloak marked with raindrops. He stepped inside, scanning the damage. "Kingsley told me you had a situation," he said. "Thought I'd better come before you tore the whole department apart." Hermione managed a thin smile. "You're just in time to see it before I do." Harry knelt beside the remains of the glass case, picking up a fragment between his fingers. "Looks like spellfire residue. Someone cast a silencing charm, too. No alarms went off." "Exactly," Hermione replied. "It wasn't stolen by a common thief. Whoever did this knew what they were taking." Harry frowned. "And what exactly were they taking?" Hermione hesitated, then reached for a parchment from her desk, one of the few that hadn't been destroyed. "This," she said, unrolling a sketch she'd made the night before. The pendant's spiral design gleamed faintly on the page. "I believe it was one of Helga Hufflepuff's personal relics. But it isn't just a trinket. It reacts to living magic, to the essence of a witch or wizard's power. I think it can transfer that power, even alter it." Harry's brow furrowed. That's dangerous, if it's true. I felt it myself, Hermione said quietly. When I held it, there's an enchantment deep within it. Not dark exactly, but old. It listens. It chooses. Harry straightened. And now it's in someone else's hands. Yes, she said grimly. Someone who dismantled my wards and left no trace. At that moment, Ron Weasley appeared in the doorway, his red hair sticking up in several directions. Thought you'd both need these, he said, then stopped short as he saw the chaos. Blimey, Hermione. You redecorating? Hermione gave him a look. It was stolen. Ron's grin vanished. The necklace thing Neville brought? You said it was locked up? It was, she replied, her voice clipped, until someone took it. Ron set down the mugs and glanced around. No signs of a fight? That's odd. More than odd, said Harry. It's deliberate. We're dealing with someone who knows the Ministry's inner workings. Hermione's eyes darkened. Then we'll find them. By noon, the three of them were gathered in the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, examining reports. It didn't take long before a name surfaced. A magical artifact broker known only as Vera, a witch who specialized in acquiring and selling enchanted heirlooms from the Founder's era. She was rumored to move between Nocturne Alley and the ruins of old wizarding estates, trading in relics most considered lost to time. That afternoon they followed the trail through the winding, shadowed streets of London's hidden magical quarter. The drizzle had turned to steady rain, and the lamps flickered with a dull orange glow. They passed through Diagon Alley, quiet now, with most shops closed for the day, and slipped down the narrow archway leading to Nocturne Alley. The air grew colder, shadows clung to the crooked walls, and the scent of damp stone filled the passage. As they moved deeper, a sign creaked faintly overhead. Vera's Curiosities, Rare Enchantments and Antiquities. Hermione drew her wand. Be careful, she's not to be underestimated. Inside the shop was dimly lit by floating candles. Shelves of strange artifacts lined the walls. Mirrors that whispered faintly. Hourglasses that ran with silver sand, rings pulsing with dull light. Behind the counter stood a tall woman draped in violet silk, her hair silver as frost. Her eyes, when she looked up, "Ah," she said softly, "the Ministry's finest. Come to accuse me of something again, Miss Granger?" Hermione stepped forward. "I'm not here to accuse you, Vera. I'm here to find what was stolen from me, a pendant, ancient, marked with Hufflepuff's emblem." Vera's smile was faint but sharp. "You think I have it? I think you know who does." The witch's eyes flickered with something unreadable. "Perhaps," she murmured, "but knowledge comes at a cost." Hermione held her gaze. "You'll be compensated." Vera leaned closer, her silver hair glinting in the candlelight. "Gold doesn't interest me, dear girl, but stories do. I want to know what you saw when you held it." Hermione hesitated. The memory of her dream flickered in her mind. The field of flowers, the golden-haired woman, the whisper. "I saw something ancient. A warning, perhaps." Vera's expression softened. "Ah, so it has begun again." "What has begun?" Harry asked sharply. Vera's gaze drifted toward a crystal orb on the shelf beside her. Inside, faint shapes moved like smoke. The gift. Every few centuries, the relic awakens and seeks a bearer, one whose magic is in balance with their heart. But power such as that attracts others, those who would claim it not for balance but for control. Ron frowned. "Who are we talking about?" Vera's answer was a whisper. They call themselves the Circle of Equinox, an old faction that believes magic should be redistributed. They dream of a world where every witch and wizard shares the same strength, the same gifts. Noble, perhaps, but their methods... She trailed off, shaking her head. They take from the strong to give to the weak, and they've taken your pendant to make it so. Hermione's heart clenched. Then they'll hurt people, drain them of their own magic. Vera's voice dropped to a murmur. Unless you stop them first. Outside, thunder rolled over the rooftops. Hermione turned to Harry and Ron. If they're planning to use the pendant, it'll leave traces of magical imbalance. I can track it. Then let's go, Ron said, already heading for the door. As they stepped back into the rain, Vera's voice followed them, quiet, almost kind. Be wary, Hermione Granger. The pendant doesn't just test those who seek to use it, it tests those who seek to destroy it. Hermione paused, glancing back, but the door had already closed and the shop behind it was gone. The rain fell harder now, running in silver streams down the cobblestones. Far above the city, lightning tore through the clouds, and Hermione felt the air hum with magic. Wild, restless, waiting. The hunt had begun. But even as she led her friends toward the storm, she could not shake the feeling that the pendant was not merely stolen. It was calling, and it was calling to her. The rain did not cease for days. It fell in steady sheets over London, turning the cobblestones to mirrors and the air to mist. Hermione barely noticed it. For 3 nights and days she scoured magical records, questioned contacts in every corner of the ministry, and searched through pages of spells too old for modern tongues. Harry and Ron helped where they could, though it was Hermione who carried the weight of each discovery like a stone pressing down upon her heart. The pendant was more than a relic. It was a vessel. Crafted by Helga Hufflepuff herself, it had been part of a secret enchantment meant to preserve the essence of balance within the wizarding world. But the enchantment had twisted over the centuries. The pendant no longer simply reflected balance, it absorbed it. He could take from one witch or wizard and bestow upon another, stealing strength as easily as a thief might pluck a coin from a purse. On the 4th morning, Hermione stood at her window in the Aura division, staring out at the storm. A faint chime echoed from her desk. A trace spell, long since. The pendant's been activated, she said aloud. Harry looked up from the reports he'd been reading. Where? Hermione pointed to the glowing mark on the parchment map. Northern Moors, near Whitby. That's where the disturbance originated. Ron frowned. That's a long way from London. It's remote, Hermione said, quiet, the perfect place to perform something forbidden. Within the hour they had packed their cloaks and apparated to the edge of the moors. The air there was sharp and cold, filled with the cry of distant gulls and the scent of rain-soaked earth. Mist rolled low over the ground, and the faint outline of ancient standing stones could be seen against the gray horizon. As they approached, the hum of magic grew stronger. Hermione felt it first, a vibration beneath her skin, as though the earth itself was alive. The grass shimmered faintly underfoot, and the runes carved into the stones glowed pale gold. "They've been here," she murmured. Harry crouched beside one of the stones, tracing a faint scorch mark with his gloved hand. "Spell residue," he said, "recent." Then, from beyond the stones, came a sound, a soft echo like chanting. They moved carefully toward it, cloaks drawn tight against the wind. The ground sloped downward into a hollow where a small group stood gathered around a circle of fire. Cloaked figures raised their wands, and in the heart of the fire floated the pendant, its spiral blazing with fierce, shifting light. The circle of equinox, Hermione whispered. She counted 6 figures. Their hoods concealed their faces, but one voice rose above the rest, clear and commanding. Magic belongs to all. No longer shall it favor the few. The speaker lifted their wand, and the pendant flared brighter. A stream of gold light shot outward, striking a man who stood trembling before the circle. His body convulsed, and then, suddenly, he straightened, eyes alight with new strength. Hermione, they're transferring magic. Before she could move, Ron stepped forward, anger in his voice. Oi, that's enough. The chanting stopped. All 6 heads turned toward them. Fools, the leader said, you come too late. A battle erupted. Spells flared through the rain, flashing red and blue and gold. The air was thick with energy. The moor trembled under the force of it. Harry deflected a stunner, sending it ricocheting off a stone. Ron cast a disarming charm that sent one of the cloaked figures sprawling backward. Hermione's eyes stayed fixed on the pendant. It was pulsing wildly now, the gold deepening to an amber glow. She darted forward through the chaos, raising her wand. Finite incantatem, she cried. The spell struck the fire, but instead of extinguishing it, the flames turned white, blazing high enough to reach the stones above. The pendant rose higher, spinning faster. Harry, she shouted, it's overloading. Harry turned, his wand already raised. Together they cast the strongest containment charm they knew, weaving their magic into a shimmering barrier around the pendant. For a heartbeat, it held. Then the pendant burst with light. Hermione was thrown backward, crashing hard into the wet earth. The world swam in her vision. When she blinked, she saw the leader of the circle standing over her. The hood had fallen back, revealing a woman's face, sharp, pale, and filled with a fervent light. You can't stop what's begun, the woman said softly. The world will know equality. Hermione tried to rise, but her limbs were heavy. The woman lifted the pendant, still glowing faintly. You, of all people, should understand. You fought for justice once, for fairness. Isn't this the same? Hermione met her gaze. Stealing power isn't justice. It's tyranny dressed as mercy. For a moment, the woman's expression flickered, then hardened. You'll see soon enough. Before Hermione could react, the woman vanished in a crack of The remaining members of the circle fled into the mist, leaving only the echo of their departure and the smell of scorched earth. Ron stumbled toward her, clutching his arm. You all right? Hermione nodded weakly. She took it, their leader. She apparated away before I could stop her. Harry knelt beside them, face grim. We'll find her. Whoever she is, she's not finished yet. They lingered on the moor until dawn. The fire had burned out, leaving only a blackened scar in the grass. The stones hummed faintly, still warm to the touch. Hermione stood silent for a long time, gazing at the horizon, where the first light of morning touched the sea. She thought again of her dream. The golden-haired woman who had spoken of gifts freely given. Helga Hufflepuff's voice, perhaps, or the memory of it. Find the balance. Hermione clenched her wand in her hand. She's heading north, she said quietly. Toward the coast. There are old ruins there, the kind used for ritual enchantments. If the circle means to complete the transfer, that's where it'll happen. Harry nodded. Then that's where we'll go. And as the sun rose over the misty cliffs, the 3 friends set out once more, tired, bruised, but resolute. For for though the pendant had vanished into shadow, its magic still pulsed faintly in the air, guiding Hermione onward. She could feel it now, not as a hum but as a heartbeat, calling her name, calling her home. The journey north carried them through wild country. Days of travel blurred into one another. Windswept fields, shadowed forests, lonely inns where even the fireplaces seemed to whisper secrets. Hermione, Harry, and Ron pressed onward, following the faint traces of magic that drifted like threads through the air. Each night Hermione's wand would glow faintly, pointing always towards the same destination, the ruins of a fortress that once stood above the North Sea, abandoned since before Hogwarts was founded. The cliffs there were sheer, the waves far below roaring like an ancient beast. Above, the ruins of the old stronghold loomed against the storm-filled sky, broken towers and crumbling arches, their stones veined with moss. "This is it," Hermione said, her voice low. "The magic's strongest here." Ron squinted up at the dark mass of the ruins. "Perfect place for a secret society, creepy as anything." Harry drew his wand, its tip glowing faintly. "Let's be careful. They'll know we're coming." The path that wound up to the fortress was narrow and slick with rain. As they climbed, the wind rose, whipping Hermione's cloak around her legs. She could feel the energy in the air growing stronger with each step, wild, unstable, like a spell on the verge of breaking. At the top, they found an ancient stone gate, half buried in ivy. Beyond it lay a courtyard, filled with broken statues and fallen banners. The ground shimmered faintly, covered in old ward marks that still pulsed with dim light. "They've activated the site," Hermione said. "Look, binding sigils, containment lines. It's all ritual preparation." "Meaning they're getting ready to use the pendant again?" Harry replied. Before Hermione could answer, a faint sound carried through the rain, a cry, sharp and desperate. Ron stiffened. That came from inside. They moved quickly through the ruined archways, spells at the ready. Inside, the great hall was lit by floating orbs of white fire. Figures in dark cloaks stood in a ring around a raised platform at the center. The leader, the pale woman Hermione had seen on the moor, was there, holding the pendant high. Its spiral gleamed fiercely, sending ripples of light over the walls. Before her knelt several figures, men and women, their faces pale with fear. "They're taking from them," Hermione whispered. "She's drawing magic from them to power the pendant." Harry's jaw tightened. "Then we stop her now." They stepped into the light. The leader's wand flew from her hand, clattering across the stone floor. The cloaked followers turned, spells erupting in a blaze of color. The hall erupted into chaos. Spells ricocheted from broken pillars, lighting the air with flashes of red and gold. Ron shielded Hermione as a blast of green light streaked toward her. It shattered against his protection charm, leaving sparks that hissed out in the rain, seeping through the roof. Hermione's focus remained on the pendant. It hovered above the dais, spinning faster, its light growing so bright it hurt her eyes. She aimed her wand. "Containment field now," she shouted. Harry joined her, their spells intertwining to form a glowing barrier around the relic. But the magic within it was too strong. The field wavered, cracked, and shattered with a thunderous sound. The leader laughed, her voice echoing through the hall. "You cannot contain what was meant to be shared." A wave of force erupted from the pendant, throwing them all backward. The captives on the floor screamed as the light enveloped them. When it faded, they lay motionless but breathing. Their auras, Hermione could sense, were dimmer, like candles burned too low. The leader stepped forward, her eyes alight with triumph. "Behold," she cried, "the gift of equality, magic shared among all." Hermione struggled to her feet. "You've stolen their strength," she said, fury in her voice. "That isn't sharing. It's theft." The woman turned to her, and for the first time Hermione saw the faint traces of exhaustion on her face. "It's balance," she said. "I was born without magic. My family was squib for generations. I found this relic so that no child would ever again be born powerless in a world ruled by those who hoard their gifts." Hermione hesitated. You're a squib?" "I was," the woman said. "The pendant chose me. It gave me what your world would never allow." For a heartbeat, Hermione saw not a villain, but a woman desperate to belong. But then she saw the pendant's glow intensify once more, felt the tremor in the stone beneath her feet. It was too much power for any one person to bear. "Stop this," Hermione said, her voice trembling but firm. "If you keep drawing from it, it will consume you." The woman smiled faintly. "Then let it. I would rather be consumed than live in chains." Before Hermione could act, the pendant's light flared blinding white. A shock wave tore through the hall, shattering walls, hurling stones through the air. Hermione was thrown to the ground, her wand slipping from her fingers. Through the roaring wind and the collapsing ceiling, she saw the pendant rise higher, the spiral of vines on its surface twisting violently. Then, in an instant, it shattered. The light that poured out was not gold or white, but every color at once, wild, beautiful, terrible. It swept through the ruins, through the cliffs, out into the storm beyond. When the light faded, silence fell. Rain hissed softly through the holes in the roof. Dust hung in the air. The leader lay unconscious near the dais, the fragments of the pendant scattered around her like shards of glass. Hermione crawled toward them, her body aching, and gathered the pieces into her hand. They were still warm. Ron groaned from across the hall. "Please tell me that's over." Harry limped toward them, his glasses cracked, his wand still drawn. "I think so," he said quietly. Then he looked at Hermione. "You all right?" She nodded faintly, though her hand still trembled. "It's over for now." "But the enchantment inside the pendant, it's not gone. It's just released." As if in answer, a faint shimmer ran across the floor, like mist drifting upward before fading into the night. They carried the unconscious leader down the When they reached the bottom, the sea was calm again, its waves silver under the moonlight. Hermione looked once more at the fragments in her hand. The vines on the metal had gone still, the glow extinguished. Yet when she held them close, she could still feel a heartbeat within them, a slow, patient rhythm, as though the relic were merely sleeping. "Let's take her to the ministry," Harry said. "She'll face trial." "Yes," Hermione murmured, "and I'll see to these." As they disapparated into the night, the storm above the cliffs broke apart, revealing a scatter of stars. Far out on the horizon, where sea met sky, a faint golden shimmer lingered, like the last breath of an ancient spell that refused to die. Hermione didn't see it, but in her heart she knew their journey with the pendant was far from over. For some gifts, even broken, are not so easily forgotten. The storm passed, yet its shadow lingered in Hermione's thoughts. Days became weeks, and though London returned to its steady rhythm of fireplaces, fluttering owls and echoing footsteps in ministry corridors. She could not find rest. The fragments of the pendant lay sealed within her office, encased in wards of her own design. No sound, no light escaped the runic case, but every so often she felt it, a quiet stirring beneath the metal. A whisper. The circle of Equinox had been dismantled. Their leader, whose name was revealed to be Mara Dathan, remained in ministry custody, guarded night and day. She spoke little, answering no questions save one, when Hermione had asked her why the pendant had chosen her. Mara had only smiled and said, "Because it remembered." That answer haunted Hermione. Remembered what or whom? She had studied the Founder's relics for years, but none had ever shown will or awareness. The Founders had left behind wisdom, not sentience. Yet this pendant, Helga Hufflepuff's gift of balance. One evening, as twilight draped the ministry halls, Hermione stood alone in her office. The city outside glowed gold and violet, and rain murmured against the windows. She opened her journal, quill scratching swiftly across the parchment. Notes filled the page. Calculations of magical transfer ratios, translation of old runes, cross-references to ancient charms of the Founder's age. But her thoughts drifted from ink to memory, to that field of sunlit flowers and the woman's voice in her dream. Find the balance. She closed the journal and turned toward the case. The fragments inside shimmered faintly, though the room was dark. "I know you can hear me," she whispered, feeling faintly foolish. "Tell me what you are." For a moment nothing moved. Then, so faint she almost missed it, the shards pulsed once in unison. The air grew warmer. The runes etched into the glass case began to glow gold. A faint hum filled the room, like the resonance of a spell waking after a long sleep. Hermione stepped closer. "Helga," she breathed. A shape began to form in the light, soft, shifting, like a figure made of mist. A woman's voice, gentle yet firm, spoke through the still air. "You are the guardian now." Hermione's heart thudded. Guardian of what? Of balance, of gift and burden alike. The circle turns as it always has. Protect it, or it will fall once more to pride. Then the light dimmed, and the voice was gone. The case fell still. Hermione stood frozen for a long moment, her breath shallow. Then she scribbled notes with shaking hands. The magic had consciousness, yes, but bound to a purpose, not a mind. It sought equilibrium, the preservation of harmony in the magical world. The next morning, she went to see Mara Dathan. The holding chamber beneath the ministry was a cold, circular room, its walls carved with restraint sigils. Mara sat in the center, her pale hair unbound. "You've been quiet," Hermione said, setting a small crystal orb on the table between them. "Perhaps you'll talk now." Mara smiled faintly. "Will talking change what you fear?" "I don't fear," Hermione replied evenly. "I learn." "Then you already know what I know," said Mara. "The pendant called to you as it did to me. You felt it. You heard it." Hermione did not answer. Mara leaned forward. "It wasn't Helga's doing. Not entirely. The pendant adapts. It listens to need. You think it was made for fairness, for sharing magic, but it was made for choice, to test what one would give up for balance." Hermione's breath caught. "Choice?" Mara nodded slowly. "You could have taken its power. It offered itself to you that night. Why didn't you?" "Because it wasn't mine to take," Hermione said firmly. "Precisely," said Mara softly. "That's why it still watches you." Hermione stared at her. "You mean—" "The fragments aren't sleeping," Mara said. "They're waiting." She rose, the chains around her wrists clinking faintly. and when they wake again, it won't be me they call to. That night Hermione returned home, but sleep would not come. Every flicker of candlelight reminded her of the pendant's glow. Every shadow seemed to hum with quiet energy. She rose from bed and crossed to her bookshelf, pulling down an old, leather-bound tome, Foundations of Founders' Magic. In its final chapters, Helga Hufflepuff's teachings were recorded in careful script. "Magic given is magic returned," the text read, "but only to hands that serve, not rule." Hermione's eyes narrowed. Magic returned. The pendant was not simply a vessel. It was part of a cycle, a source that returned power when harmony was restored. If it had drained magic through imbalance, perhaps it could restore it when balance was renewed. Her thoughts leapt to the victims of the circle's ritual, those whose magic had been stolen. Could she reverse what was done? At dawn, she arrived at the spell Inside, several of the afflicted witches and wizards lay asleep, pale and weakened. Their wands lay idle beside them. The healers had tried everything, revitalizing charms, restorative potions, but their magic remained dim. Hermione drew one of the pendant fragments from her satchel, its edge glinting faintly in the early light. "This may work," she murmured. "Or it may not." She placed the shard on the bedside table of a young man whose wand hand still twitched restlessly in sleep. Then she raised her own wand. "Equilibris revertum," she whispered. For a moment, nothing. Then the shard began to glow. A fine mist of gold drifted upward, curling around the young man's hand. His breathing steadied. The faint shimmer of magic, his own, returned, flickering like a candle newly lit. The healers gasped. Hermione smiled faintly, exhaustion washing through her. "It worked," she whispered, but as the shard dimmed, she noticed something strange. The glow from the case at her side flared briefly, as if more fragments were responding. By nightfall, all 6 shards were shimmering softly. Hermione returned to her office to find the air alive with that same hum, the pulse of the pendant, whole, though still broken. The fragments rose slowly from their glass case, circling one another like stars drawn into orbit. And as she stood there, wand raised but heart unafraid, the voice came again, clearer this time, stronger. "You have restored what was taken. Now you must guard what remains." The fragments merged into a single beam of light that sank gently into Hermione's open hand. When it faded, the pendant was whole once more, gleaming faintly. Hermione looked down at it, her breath caught somewhere between awe and dread. For she knew now what the enchanted gift truly was. Not a relic of power, but a living covenant. And it had chosen her. The days that word of Hermione's discovery spread swiftly through the ministry, though few understood the true magnitude of it. Officially, the report described a stabilized magical relic under observation. Unofficially, whispers moved through every corridor that Hermione Granger had awakened a power older than Hogwarts itself. Hermione herself hardly slept. The pendant lay within her warded chambers, its light dim and steady now, as though resting, yet she could feel it pulsing faintly through her wand arm, a rhythm matching her own heartbeat. Whenever she entered the room, the glow brightened. When she left, it faded. It was no longer just an artifact. It was bound to her. On the 3rd night, she sat at her desk, candlelight dancing over parchment filled with scrawled notes. Every reference to Hufflepuff's relics spoke of fairness, of loyalty, of unity. But nowhere did it mention a living enchantment. If Helga had created something capable of choosing a guardian, she had left no record of it. Hermione's thoughts were interrupted by a soft tap at the door. Harry stepped in, looking weary but alert. "You missed dinner," he said quietly. "Again?" She smiled faintly. "I've been busy." "I can see that." He approached the table, glancing at the pendant resting under its faintly shimmering ward. "Still keeping it close?" "It reacts when I'm near," Hermione said. "It doesn't seem dangerous anymore, but I can't tell if that's because it's dormant or because it trusts me." Harry frowned. "Trusts you? You make it sound alive." "I think it is, in some way," she murmured. "It speaks to me, not in words exactly, but in feeling, as if it understands intent." Harry studied her face, then nodded. "You've handled worse things, Hermione. Just don't handle this one alone." She looked up at him then, her expression softening. "I won't." But as he left, Hermione's thoughts returned to the relic. She rose, crossed to the ward. The pendant pulsed once, warmly, as though greeting her. In that instant, a vision swept through her mind. She stood in a great hall of stone, its walls lined with banners of deep gold and green. The air shimmered with sunlight, and at the center stood Helga Hufflepuff herself, kind-eyed, robed in amber silk, her wand glowing softly. "You have restored my gift," the ancient witch said, her voice resonant as wind through leaves. "But balance is never still. It moves with time as hearts do. Now that it is bound to you, the circle must complete." Hermione found her voice. "What circle?" "The one that was broken," said Helga. "The gift was made for 4. Each founder crafted a piece of harmony. Mine for fairness, Ravenclaw's for knowledge, Gryffindor's for courage, and Slytherin's for will. When united, they preserve the equilibrium of magic itself. When sundered," her eyes darkened, "the world falters." The vision flickered, the golden hall dimmed, shadows creeping along its walls. "Seek the others," Helga whispered. "The gift will guide you, as it guided me." Then the light broke apart, and Hermione was back in her office, trembling. The candle had burned low, wax spilling like tears across the parchment. "The others," she whispered. "The founders made more than one." She spent the next 2 days in the archives beneath the ministry, combing through tomes so old they crumbled at her touch. Ron brought food and left without questions. Harry sent messages from the field, though even his reassurances could not quiet the pulse of urgency rising in her chest. At last, deep in a forgotten vault, Hermione found a map etched in silver ink tracing the locations of the founders' lost relics. One mark glowed faintly when she touched it. Ravenclaw's diadem, long believed destroyed. Another, however, shone brighter, a relic unaccounted for. "Slytherin's crest," she breathed. It was said to have vanished. Some believed it destroyed, others hidden beneath the ancient school itself. That evening, Hermione met Harry and Ron in her office. The pendant, now hanging on a simple chain, rested at her throat. "You're telling me," Ron said slowly, "that there are 3 more of those things?" "Not quite like this one," Hermione replied. "Each founder forged an artifact to preserve their own ideal. Helga's pendant, Rowena's diadem, Godric's sword, and Salazar's crest. Together they balance each other. Apart, magic gets messy," Ron finished grimly. "Precisely. And I think someone's already searching for the others." Harry's brow furrowed. "You think the Circle of Equinox had more than one relic?" "I think they knew of them," she said. "Their ritual wasn't random, it was a pattern, a replication of an ancient design meant to draw the relic's power together." Harry's jaw tightened. Then we find the crest before they do. They traveled first to Hogwarts. The castle welcomed them like an old friend, its torches flickering brighter as they crossed the gates. Professor McGonagall greeted them in the entrance hall, her eyes sharp though warm. "Miss Granger," she said with a hint of pride. "Or should I say, Madam Deputy Minister?" Hermione blushed faintly. "Just Hermione, please." McGonagall's gaze drifted to the pendant at her neck. "That, I trust, is under control?" "For the moment," Hermione said. "But I need the castle's help. I'm searching for the location of Salazar Slytherin's crest." The headmistress's eyes narrowed. "Slytherin left few traces, and those he did are best left buried." "Please," Hermione said quietly, "if the relics are connected, the balance of our world may depend on them." For a long moment, McGonagall studied her. Then she nodded. "Very well. You'll have access to the Founder's archives below the library. Hogwarts remembers its maker, and Slytherin's legacy is not easily disturbed." That night, the trio descended into the deep vault beneath the castle. The passage was cold, lined with serpentine carvings that glimmered faintly under Hermione's wand light. The air smelled of damp stone and old secrets. At the end of the corridor stood a great iron door shaped like a serpent coiled around a shield. On its surface was the crest itself, a silver serpent upon a field of green, eyes made of tiny emeralds. Hermione stepped forward, feeling the pendant at her throat grow warm. "It's reacting," she murmured. The door shuddered, ancient gears grinding as though waking from centuries of sleep. Slowly it began to open. A rush of cold air swept past them, carrying with it the scent of salt and something older, deeper, magic unbound. Beyond the doorway lay a vast chamber lit by green fire. At its center rose a stone dais, and upon it rested a relic shaped like a scaled medallion, glowing faintly with serpentine light. "The crest," Harry whispered. Hermione took a cautious step forward. The pendant at her neck flared golden in response, its light intertwining with the relic's green glow. For a moment the colors danced together. Then the flames in the chamber roared higher. A voice hissed through the air, low and cold. "Who dares wake the will of Slytherin?" The torches flared emerald. Shadows gathered at the edges of the chamber, swirling into form, and Hermione, heart pounding, realized they were not alone. The chamber trembled as the serpentine voice filled the air. The torches blazed green, casting ghostly light upon the walls carved with scales and serpents. Hermione drew her wand instinctively, and Harry and Ron moved to either side of her, their stances tense. The shadows that clung to the corners began to take shape. Tall, cloaked figures with gleaming eyes like molten silver. From the center of the chamber, its glow rippled outward, forming a swirling mist that coalesced into a single, towering figure. The outline of a man stood before them, regal and terrible, his face thin and sharp as a blade. "Salazar Slytherin, you awaken what should have remained sealed," the apparition hissed, his eyes glimmering like cold fire. "My crest was forged to preserve the will of ambition, not to be disturbed by the unworthy." Hermione swallowed hard, her heart pounding. "We don't mean to disturb it," she said steadily. "The relics are bound to each other. I came seeking balance, to restore what was lost." Slytherin's gaze flicked to the pendant hanging at her throat. "Ah, Hufflepuff's sentimentality," he sneered softly. "That old fool believed fairness could temper power. She was wrong. Power serves only those with the strength to claim it." Hermione stepped forward, and that belief nearly destroyed your legacy. Ambition without balance leads to ruin. You of all people should know that. The shadow's lips curled into a faint smile. You have courage to speak thus to me, witch, but you mistake ruin for revelation. My crest was made not to divide, but to test, to seek those whose will is unbroken. Tell me, Hermione Granger, do you believe yourself unbroken? She lifted her chin. I believe I've been tested enough to know who I am. At her words, the serpent eyes of the chamber walls flickered to life. The shadow of Slytherin raised his hand, and the ground beneath them cracked open, revealing a circular pit glowing with emerald light. Then prove it. Without warning, the magic beneath her feet surged. Hermione was pulled downward, the world blurring into darkness. She landed hard upon cold stone, alone. The echo of Harry and Ron's shouts faded above her. The air was thick with mist. She stood in what appeared to be an endless corridor of mirrors. Tall, arched, and rimmed, her reflection stared back from every direction, hundreds of Hermiones, each moving as she did. Yet as she stepped forward, she realized some were not mirrors at all. One reflection sneered. Another turned away. A third whispered something she could not hear. A chill ran through her. This is a trial, she murmured. Slytherin's test. A voice echoed around her, her own voice but colder. You seek balance, yet you've always craved control. She spun toward the nearest mirror. Her reflection smiled darkly. Every spell you cast, every rule you bend, every law you rewrite, all for the greater good, isn't it? You say you seek harmony, but deep down, you wish to shape the world in your own image. Hermione's chest tightened. That isn't true, isn't it? Her reflection whispered. When the ministry falters, who takes charge? When others hesitate, who decides what must be done? You've never stopped believing you know best. The mirrors rippled. More voices joined, hundreds whispering, accusing. Power disguised as purpose, justice twisted by pride. Stop, Hermione shouted. The word rang through the chamber, breaking several mirrors into dust. Silence followed. She stood trembling, but her voice was steady when she spoke again. I've made mistakes, but every choice I made was to protect, not to rule. If that is my flaw, then so be it. I'll own it. The remaining reflections softened, their expressions fading into calm. The corridor dimmed, and before her appeared a doorway formed of green flame. Hermione stepped through it and emerged once more in the great chamber above. Harry and Ron were there, both pale and worried. The apparition of Slytherin stood waiting, his expression unreadable. You faced your truth, he said softly. Few can. Hermione met his gaze. Your crest holds the strength of will, but even will must answer to conscience. That's the balance you never understood. For a long moment, the shade of Slytherin was silent. Perhaps, he said, or perhaps I understood too well. Power without reflection is tyranny. Reflection without will is weakness. You have shown both. Take what is yours. The medallion rose from its dais, drifting toward her. Its green light mingled with the gold of the pendant at her neck, the two colors intertwining like sunlight through leaves. When the relic touched her hand, a pulse of warmth surged through her body. Not overwhelming, but steady, purposeful. The apparition inclined his head. Guard it well, guardian of balance, the others will awaken soon. With that, his form dissolved into mist, leaving behind only the flicker of emerald flame. Hermione stood in silence for a moment, feeling the two relics' power settle within her. The pendant and the crest resonated together, not as rivals, but as complements, two halves of an ancient whole. Ron let out a low whistle. Blimey, I'll say it. You handled that better than I would have. Harry smiled faintly. I think he respected you. Or he pitied me, Hermione said softly, though there was a glint of determination in her eyes. Either way, we're one step closer. As they made their way out of the chamber, the walls seemed to shift, the serpentine carvings bowing subtly as if in acknowledgement. The air grew lighter, the oppressive hum of old magic fading into quiet. When they stepped back into the torchlit corridor, Hermione turned for one last look at the door. It had sealed itself once more, the serpent's emerald eyes now dark. Two relics reunited, she whispered, but the circle's not complete. Ravenclaw and Gryffindor remain. Any clue where to look next? Harry asked. Hermione reached into her robes and drew the pendant into her palm. The golden spiral shimmered faintly, its light shifting eastward like a compass. There, she said, toward the mountains beyond the forest. I think Rowena's relic calls from there. Ron, why can't it ever be somewhere nice like Hogsmeade? Hermione smiled faintly. Because balance isn't found in comfort, Ron. It's found in challenge. As they began their journey from the castle, the storm clouds parted above and moonlight bathed the turrets in silver. Behind them, Hogwarts slept, but deep in its foundations, the ancient wards stirred, as if aware that the old magic of its founders was breathing once again. And in the quiet between the wind and the night, the pendant at Hermione's throat pulsed once, brighter than before. A heartbeat of destiny, calling her onward toward the next relic and toward a truth older than any spell she had ever known. The following days passed in restless travel. Hermione, Harry, and Ron journeyed north through mist and wood, guided by the faint glow of the pendant that pulsed against her chest. It was not a steady light, but rhythmic, almost like breath. Each pulse drew them deeper into the wild country beyond the Scottish Highlands, where the land rose into jagged hills and the sky lay low with clouds. They camped beneath an ancient yew one evening, its roots thick and coiled like the fingers of some sleeping giant. The fire crackled low, sending sparks spiraling into the dark. Harry sat across from Hermione, studying the map she had unfurled on her knees. Still glowing east, he said quietly. Hermione nodded. The signal grows stronger each day. Rowena Ravenclaw's relic must be near. It feels higher, as though it calls from above the world rather than beneath it. Ron poked at the fire with a stick. Higher? What, are we climbing a mountain now? Hermione smiled faintly. Perhaps. Ron sighed. Brilliant. Nothing says ancient wisdom like frostbite. But despite his grumbling, the three pressed onward the next morning, winding through narrow passes and up stony slopes. The forest thinned as they climbed, giving way to barren ridges veiled in mist. At last, as the sun began to sink beyond the peaks, they saw it. A structure clinging to the mountainside like a bird's nest, its stone walls pale against the dusk. Columns of white marble rose from the cliff, and faint blue light shimmered between them, like threads of silk. The Eyrie of the Mind, Hermione whispered, awe in her voice. Ravenclaw's hidden sanctuary. Harry gazed up at the vast structure. You've read about it? Only fragments, she said. It was said to be a place of learning beyond books. a realm where thought itself became visible. They climbed the last stretch in silence. The path was steep, carved into the mountain, each step lined with runes that glowed softly as they passed. When they reached the gate, it opened soundlessly, as though the mountain had been waiting for them. Inside was a great hall carved entirely of marble, its walls lined with luminous glass that reflected the stars, though night had not yet fallen. Floating orbs of blue light drifted lazily through the air, illuminating tall arches and curving stairways that spiraled upward into shadow. At the center of the hall stood a single pedestal. Upon it rested a crown wrought of silver and sapphire, delicate as frost, glowing faintly with inner light. "The diadem," Hermione breathed. Ron took an involuntary step backward. "Wait, the diadem? I thought that thing was destroyed when we..." Hermione shook her head. "That was a fragment. A vessel corrupted by Voldemort's magic. This must be the true form, restored to its original state when the curse was broken." She stepped forward. The diadem's glow deepened and a faint whisper stirred the air. "Wit beyond measure is man's greatest treasure." The voice was soft and lilting like a sigh. Then, from the shadows above the stairway, light began to gather, swirling into the graceful figure of a woman. She was tall and stately, her robes flowing like water, her eyes bright as stars. "Few walk the path of thought without losing their way," the spirit said. "Fewer still seek truth, not for power, but for wisdom." Hermione bowed her head. "Lady Ravenclaw, I come to restore the balance of the Founder's magic. The relics have awakened." The ghost regarded her silently for a moment. "I know. I have watched. Helga's pendant has chosen you. Salazar's crest has tested you. Now you stand before knowledge itself. But tell me, child, why seek balance?" Hermione hesitated. "Because without it, magic tears at the world. It bends to greed, to fear. I've seen what happens when power runs unchecked." Rowena's gaze softened, though her tone remained cool. "And yet even balance can blind. Harmony is not the absence of conflict, but the understanding of it. Do you understand yourself, Hermione Granger?" The question struck her with quiet force. I hope so." "Then prove it." The chamber darkened. The diadem lifted from the pedestal, its sapphire light expanding until it filled the room. When the glare faded, Hermione found herself standing alone in a circular library, endless shelves rising into mist. Every book hummed faintly and whispers filled the air, her own thoughts, doubts, and memories echoing from the shadows. She moved between the shelves, running her fingers along the spines. The whispers grew louder. Brilliant but overbearing. She always has to be right. She'll never rest until she controls it all. Hermione clenched her fists. "No," she murmured. "I don't control to rule. I do it to protect." Another voice answered, her own but older, wearier. "And when protection turns to possession, when you cannot let go, even of what must change." She turned and saw herself standing opposite, wearing the diadem. "You think wisdom means having all the answers," said the reflection. "But true wisdom is knowing when to release them." Hermione's throat tightened. "Then tell me how." Her reflection smiled faintly. "You just refuse to trust others enough to fail." The words struck like a spell. For a long moment Hermione stood motionless. Then slowly she nodded. "Then I trust," she said softly. "I trust the world and myself to learn." At that, the reflection vanished, leaving behind only the diadem hovering in the air. Hermione reached out and placed it gently upon her brow. Light cascaded through the library, flooding the shelves, filling every shadow with radiant blue. When it faded, she stood once more in the marble hall before Rowena Ravenclaw's spirit. The founder smiled. Wisdom is not the end of thought, but its beginning. You have earned the diadem's grace. The crown shimmered, dissolving into silver light that flowed into Hermione's pendant, joining the gold and green with a new brilliance of blue. 3 relics united, Rowena said softly. But beware, Hermione Granger. The last will not yield easily. Gryffindor's flame tests not mind or heart, but soul. Hermione met her gaze. Then I'll face it when the time comes. Rowena inclined her head. May courage guide you, for you will need it soon. The spirit faded, leaving silence and the faint scent of winter air. Ron let out a shaky breath. So that's 3. Please tell me the next one's not guarded by another ghost. Harry smiled wryly. Knowing our luck, it's probably guarded by something worse. Hermione touched the pendant at her throat. The 3 colors shimmered together, gold, green, and blue, casting a soft light across her face. It's nearly complete, she said, but the last relic belongs to Godric Gryffindor. And if I'm right, his lies closer to danger than any we've faced. Outside the Eyrie, the sky had turned to dusk. As they descended the mountain, thunder rumbled far to the south, distant yet deliberate, as though the world itself were warning them. And as the storm gathered on the horizon, the pendant's light flickered. The first red shimmer of the pendant haunted Hermione all the way down the mountain. It was faint, like a heartbeat buried in embers, but unmistakable. She felt it pulse whenever thunder rolled in the south, as though the relic itself knew what waited beyond the storm. They camped that night in the shadow of a ravine, the fire burning low beneath a canopy of stars. The world was quiet save for the restless hiss of wind among the rocks. Harry and Ron slept at last, but Hermione lay awake, her hand resting on the pendant against her chest. Its warmth ebbed and flowed like a tide. She closed her eyes and thought of the founders, the gentle steadiness of Helga, the cold clarity of Rowena, the dangerous cunning of Salazar, and now there remained one, Godric Gryffindor, the founder who had believed that courage could temper all others. Courage of heart, she whispered into the dark. But what kind of courage? When dawn came, they set out toward the lowlands, following the crimson flicker that now burned brighter each hour. The storm clouds that had loomed far off the night before grew vast and heavy, rolling across the horizon like a dark tide. By midday they had reached the edge of a vast moor, its grasses flattened by wind. Beyond it rose the ruins of a fortress, broad towers broken by time, and walls half swallowed by ivy. Lightning forked above its highest rampart, and the pendant throbbed with each strike. This must be it, Harry said, his cloak snapping in the wind. Ron squinted through the rain. Looks like Gryffindor's idea of a holiday home. Hermione smiled faintly. It's more than that. This was his first stronghold, Caer Argrid, the fortress where he forged his sword. The rain quickened as they crossed the open moor. By the time they reached the gates, their boots were soaked, and the sky churned black with thunder. The massive iron doors groaned open without a touch. Inside, the air was warm. The great hall was lit by torches that burned with scarlet flame. The walls were hung with banners depicting lions mid-roar, and the air smelled faintly of steel. At the far end of the hall stood a raised dais, upon which rested a sword, unlike any Hermione had seen. Its blade gleamed with the color of dawn, and its hilt was worked in gold, set with rubies that seemed to pulse like living hearts. "The sword of Gryffindor," Harry murmured. Hermione shook her head. "No, that sword was but a reflection, a replica formed by goblin craft. This is the true blade, the Founder's own, and beside it, next to the sword, lay a small golden circlet etched with the mark of a lion. It glowed faintly, answering the light of the pendant. "The heart band," Hermione whispered. "Gryffindor's relic." She stepped forward, but before her foot touched the dais, a voice thundered through the hall. "None may claim the heart band who has not faced fear unarmed." The torches flared higher. From the flames emerged a tall figure clad in armor the color of blood and gold. His face was stern but kind, his eyes fierce with the fire of conviction. Godric Gryffindor himself. Harry and Ron bowed instinctively. Hermione stood her ground, awe mixing with dread. "Great Founder," she said, "I seek the heart band to restore balance to the relics of the Four. The world trembles once more, and—" Gryffindor raised a hand. "Words are wind. Courage is proven not by speech, but by trial." The air shuddered. The torches went out and the hall dissolved into darkness. When light returned, Hermione was alone. The floor beneath her was gone. She stood on a narrow bridge of stone spanning an endless chasm. A roaring sound rose from below as if fire and wind themselves warred in the depths. Gryffindor's voice echoed from nowhere and everywhere. "Face what you fear most. Only then may you claim my heart band." Hermione gripped her wand tighter. Then, from the shadows across the bridge, something moved. A figure stepped forward, its outline forming from the mist. It was her, but older, colder, her eyes sharp with pride and sorrow. The apparition spoke in her own voice. "You cannot save everyone." Hermione took a step back. "You're not real." "I am every failure you could not forgive," said the Phantom. "Every friend you could not heal. You cling to responsibility until it devours you. You call it bravery, but it is fear. Fear of being powerless." Hermione's throat closed. The storm around her grew louder, lightning flashing across the chasm. The Phantom lifted its wand, her wand, and fire leapt from its tip. Hermione dodged, the heat searing her sleeve. "You can't fight me," it said softly. "You are me." Hermione raised her wand, but lowered it just as quickly. "No," she whispered, "you're what I was, what I feared, but not what I am." The apparition paused, its fire dimming. "I don't have to defeat you," Hermione said. "I just have to accept you." With that, she stepped forward and walked through the illusion. The shadow dissolved into mist, leaving only the echo of her heartbeat. The bridge steadied beneath her feet. The storm quieted. When she looked up, Gryffindor stood before her once more, his expression grave yet proud. "You faced not monsters, but yourself," he said. "That is courage, true courage, to bear the weight of your own soul and not turn away." He extended his hand, and the golden heartband lifted from the dais to hover between them. "4 relics forged by friendship, broken by time, and now restored by faith," Gryffindor said. "Guard them well, Hermione Granger. The circle nears completion, but shadows stir beyond its edge." The heartband settled upon her brow for a moment, then dissolved into crimson light, merging with the pendant's golden, green, and blue radiance. The chamber blazed with color, each hue winding around the other until they formed. When it faded, Gryffindor was gone. Only his voice remained. "Courage is not the absence of fear, but the strength to face it. Remember this, for darkness rises not always from without, but from within. The hall returned to stillness. The torches burned steady once more, casting a gentle glow upon the ancient banners. Harry and Ron rushed toward her from the far end, their faces pale with awe. "You were gone for hours," Harry said. "Then the whole place lit up like sunrise." Hermione smiled faintly. "It's done. The heart band has joined the others." Ron eyed the pendant. "So that's it? The circle's complete?" Hermione hesitated. The pendant now glowed with 4 colors: gold, green, blue, and red, spinning slowly, like the turning of the seasons. But beneath the light, she sensed something else. A pulse of warning, low and steady, like the calm before a storm. "Not yet," she said quietly. "Something's coming. The relics. They've awakened something older than even the founders." Outside, thunder cracked again, louder than before, and for an instant the sky over Caer Argred split with fire. The relics were united, and now the world would answer. The storm did not pass. It lingered like a living thing, coiling around the sky above Caer Argred. Rain lashed the stones and thunder rolled without pause, shaking the ancient towers to their roots. Inside the fortress, Hermione stood at the window, watching lightning dance along the horizon. The pendant at her throat blazed with all 4 colors now: gold, green, blue, and red. The light shifting like breath, alive and restless. Harry and Ron were nearby, drying their cloaks with hasty charms. The fire in the hearth guttered in the wind, though it seemed to Hermione that no ordinary draft caused it. The air had changed. It thrummed softly, as if some unseen force pulsed in the bones of the world. Ron glanced at the pendant and winced. "Are you sure it's safe to keep wearing it?" Hermione didn't answer at once. Her fingers brushed the metal, feeling it warm against her skin. "It's bound to me now," she said at last. "If I remove it, it might destabilize the enchantment, or worse, break the link between the relics." "Maybe breaking the link wouldn't be so bad," Harry murmured. "You said it yourself, Hermione. The founders made these things to preserve balance. But if they're all together again, maybe they're doing something." "They are," she said quietly. "They're waking something." Her eyes turned to the window again. The storm clouds moved like a living tide, and far off in the distance a faint, unnatural glow flickered within the thunderheads. Not lightning, but something older, deeper, and red as heart's blood. That night sleep did not come easily. Hermione sat by the fire long after her friends had gone to rest. She opened her journal and began to write, her quill scratching softly across the parchment. 4 relics, 4 hearts of magic. If united, they restore balance. But balance implies opposition. There must be something set against them, a counterweight. Perhaps that is what I feel stirring. The relics are not only conduits of harmony, they are keys. And whatever they unlock is not merely symbolic. A sudden gust extinguished the candles. The fire guttered low, burning blue for an instant before returning to orange. Hermione froze. The pendant flared at her throat, and for a moment she saw shapes moving within its light. Faint outlines like faces glimpsed through glass. Then, from the darkness behind her, a whisper, "You should not have awakened them." She spun, wand raised. A figure stood by the doorway, half-shadowed. For one dreadful heartbeat, she thought it was Mara Dathan, escaped from ministry custody. But this was no living witch. The figure was tall, robed in darkness that shimmered like mist, its eyes twin embers of silver. The figure did not move closer, but its voice filled the room like echoing bells. "I am what they left behind. the balance made flesh, the opposite to all creation, the silence that follows song. Harry and Ron came running, wands drawn. The figure's gaze turned toward them, and the temperature in the room dropped sharply. Frost crawled along the walls, turning the air to breathless cold. Destroying the relics would have kept me sleeping, the being said. But you have bound them again. You have opened the circle and the world will tremble. Hermione's heart hammered. If you are the opposite of the Founder's magic, their shadow, then you exist only because they created you. You have no will of your own. The figure smiled faintly. Every light cast shadow, Hermione Granger, even yours. Then it raised its hand. Darkness exploded outward like a storm of cinders. Hermione's shield charm flared gold, barely holding against the force. Ron shouted a curse, but it passed harmlessly through the figure's form, scattering sparks. Harry lunged forward, wand blazing. Expecto Patronum! The silver stag burst from his wand, charging the figure, but when it struck, the light shattered into fragments that fell like broken glass. The shadow only laughed, a sound that echoed like thunder. Your world forgets, it said. The Founders made balance not to preserve peace, but to contain me, and now their keys are whole again. The seal will not hold. It extended a hand toward Hermione, the pendant ripped free of her neck, floating in the air between them. The colors within it writhed, swirling like a storm. No, she cried, casting a binding charm. Golden chains of light shot from her wand, wrapping around the relic, pulling it back. The figure faltered, its form flickering. Harry and Ron joined her, their spells merging, light and force intertwining, driving the darkness back, step by step. The shadow You cannot hold forever what the world has forgotten, it whispered. When the dawn comes, so shall I. And with that, it vanished, leaving only silence and the faint shimmer of frost melting from the stones. For a long moment, none of them spoke. The storm outside had stilled, though lightning still flickered along the horizon. Ron broke the quiet first. Tell me that didn't just happen. Hermione lowered her wand slowly, her breath unsteady. It did. And now we know what we're facing. Harry turned toward her. What was it? They're opposite, she said softly. The counterbalance to the Founder's magic. When they created the relics to sustain harmony, they forged something else in the process, a shadow, to absorb their excess power. It must have slept for centuries. Until now. She picked up the pendant, now dim once more. By uniting the relics, I gave it strength. I didn't realize I was unlocking its prison. Ron groaned. So you're saying we just woke up an ancient dark entity made out of unbalance? Hermione gave him a wan smile. Something like that. Harry crossed his arms. Then how do we put it back to sleep? Hermione's gaze turned distant. The Founders created the relics to contain it. But if that seal has broken, we may need to rebuild it. Not by hiding the relics again, but by mastering what they represent. She rose and looked toward you in the storm-tossed horizon. We'll need to return to Hogwarts. The castle was the center of their enchantment. Whatever seal they made, it began there. Ron rubbed his neck. Back to school again, just when I thought I'd graduated for good. Hermione smiled faintly, though her eyes were shadowed. This time, we may not all make it through as students. As they prepared to leave, the wind outside shifted. Far above the fortress, the clouds parted for an instant, revealing not moon or stars, but a vast whirl of red and silver light, twisting like an eye, and as they descended from Caer Argrid, the pendant's colors dimmed to a single deep crimson, beating like a living heart against Hermione's skin. A warning and a promise. The shadow had awakened, and it was waiting for her return. The journey back to Hogwarts was long and silent. Clouds thickened across the skies, swallowing the moon, and the air itself felt laden with some invisible heaviness. The magical roads they followed, ancient paths laid down by wizards of old, shivered with unseen power. The relic's unity had changed the world's very pulse. Hermione rode at the front of the group, her cloak drawn tight, the pendant concealed beneath it. Every so often she felt it stir, like a living thing, restless and uneasy. It glowed faintly through the fabric, a single heartbeat of red. When at last the spires of Hogwarts appeared against the horizon, pale in the dawn's mist, Hermione felt a pang of both relief and dread. The castle's familiar silhouette should have comforted her, but instead it seemed to watch, as if it too sensed the shifting tide of magic. Professor McGonagall was waiting for them when they arrived at the gates. Her face was drawn, her eyes sharper than Hermione had ever seen them. "The wards tremble," she said without preamble. "The portraits whisper that the air tastes of storm and ash. I take it this is your doing, Miss Granger?" Hermione bowed her head. "Partly. The relics of the founders have been reunited, but in doing so, we've awakened what they were meant to contain." McGonagall's gaze flicked to the pendant at Hermione's throat. "I feared as much. Come inside, all of you. The castle grows uneasy." Inside, the corridors felt changed. Candles burned lower, their flames flickering even without draft. Portraits whispered hurriedly to one another as the trio passed. The suits of armor shifted restlessly, the clang of their movement echoing faintly down the stone halls. In the great hall, the four relics merged into one pendant lay before her, its surface faintly pulsing. She drew a slow breath. "The founders didn't just create these relics for protection or balance," she said. "They used them to seal something beneath the castle, a being of pure magical counterforce. It calls itself the Silence." Harry frowned. "And now it's awake." "Partially," Hermione said. "It's not whole yet, but every surge of magic, every spell cast within these walls will feed it. That's why the castle's reacting." Ron leaned back in his chair, his expression grim. "So what? This silence thing eats magic?" "In a way," Hermione replied. "It absorbs imbalance. The founders trapped it by creating perfect equilibrium among their own powers: kindness, wit, ambition, courage. Together, they anchored the seal. Alone, it weakens." McGonagall's eyes narrowed. "Then we must reinforce it." Hermione hesitated. "That's the problem. The founder's magic was unique. The seal can't be reforged by anyone else. Unless..." She looked up, her eyes bright with sudden thought. "Unless the relics themselves act through us." "You mean," Ron said slowly, "you'll have to use them?" Hermione nodded. "Each relic embodies one part of the balance. Together, they might restore the harmony that holds the silence in check, but it will require channeling all four at once. It's never been done." Harry placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then we'll help. If the founders stood together to create it, maybe we can stand in their place." Hermione looked at him, her heart tightening. "You'd be risking your lives." Ron snorted. "We've been doing that since we were 11. Might as well keep the streak alive." McGonagall's lips twitched faintly. "I'll prepare the wards. The castle will lend what strength it can." By evening, the storm had returned. The sky over Hogwarts blazed with crimson lightning that struck the highest towers. The ground trembled, and somewhere deep below the castle, an echoing pulse answered the storm above. They gathered in the great hall once more, but it was no longer a place of feasts or laughter. The tables had been cleared away, the torches burned with blue flame, the air itself hummed with restrained power. Hermione stood at the center, the pendant clasped in her hands. Harry and Ron took their places beside her, while McGonagall, Hagrid, and several others formed a circle around them. "Whatever happens," Hermione said quietly, "don't interfere. The relics will guide the magic, but they might test us first." The pendant began to glow, first gold, then green, then blue, then red. The colors wound together, spinning faster until they formed a sphere of light around Hermione. She heard the voices then, Helga's warmth, Rowena's calm, Salazar's cunning, Godric's fire, each distinct yet woven into harmony. Guard the balance, anchor the seal. The floor of the great hall split open, revealing a spiral of stone steps leading downward. Wind howled up from below, carrying the scent of earth and ancient magic. Without hesitation, Hermione descended, the others following. The steps led into a cavern vast and dark, its ceiling lost to shadow. At its center pulsed a pool of molten light, the heart of Hogwarts itself, where the Founder's enchantments intertwined. As Hermione approached, the pendant's glow spread outward, touching the walls. 4 symbols appeared: lion, serpent, eagle, and badger, each carved in light. She raised the pendant high. "In the names of the Founders," she said, her voice trembling yet strong, "let balance be restored." The relic's light shot upward, striking the cavern's roof. The air crackled. Magic swirled around them, fierce and beautiful. For a heartbeat, Hermione thought it might work. Then came the sound, a low, terrible hum that rose from the depths like a growl. The molten pool darkened, its glow shifted. "You cannot bind what was born from freedom," a voice hissed. It was the same tone she'd heard at Caer Argrid, ancient, cold, and hungry. The air rippled as the silence began to take form. It rose like smoke, a towering shadow shaped vaguely like a man, its edges wavering as though it could not hold itself together. Within it burned a single eye of silver fire. Hermione felt her knees weaken under its presence. It was not evil in the way of dark wizards or curses. It was the opposite of all creation, the void that lingered after every spell. "You cannot destroy me," it said. "I am the space between all things, the pause between breath, the stillness after sound. Your Founders trapped me once, but even they could not erase what is eternal." Harry stepped forward, his wand blazing. "Then we'll trap you again." The silence turned its gaze upon him, and his light dimmed. "Bravery without knowledge," it whispered. "How fragile." Hermione clenched her fists. The pendant blazed against her chest, and the voices of the Founders rose in chorus. "Anchor, unite, become one." The relic's power surged through her, burning with a brilliance that seared her vision. She felt the magic of her friends beside her, their strength joining hers. Together they wove their will into the light. The silence screamed, a sound that shook the cavern itself. The walls cracked, the earth trembled, and the air was filled with swirling fire and shadow. Hermione pressed forward, her voice rising above the roar. "You are not freedom," she cried. "You are fear. You are what we become when we stop believing in light." The pendant flared, 4 colors merging into white, and struck the shadow squarely in the chest. For an instant, all was light. When it faded, Hermione was kneeling beside the pool, her body trembling. The cavern was silent. The shadow was gone. The pendant hung dim against her skin, its once brilliant colors now faint and soft, like the dying glow of twilight. "Is it over?" Ron whispered. Hermione looked into the molten light of the pool. Deep within, she thought she saw movement. A ripple, nothing more. "For now," she said quietly, "the silence sleeps again. But it will never vanish completely. Balance must always be guarded, or it will wake anew." Above them, Hogwarts stones groaned, softly settling. The storm outside began to fade, replaced by a still, steady rain. And for the first time in weeks, Hermione felt peace. Not victory, not triumph, only quiet understanding. For even in magic, light and shadow must coexist, and she, its newest guardian, would bear that truth for all her days. When the first rays of dawn touched the turrets of Hogwarts, a deep stillness lay over the castle. The storm had passed at last, but the air remained heavy with the scent of lightning and ash. Hermione stood at the highest balcony of the astronomy tower, her cloak whipping softly in the wind. Below her, the grounds gleamed with rain. The lake mirrored a pale gold sky, and the ancient walls of the school shone as if washed clean by the storm. She clutched the pendant in her hand. Its light was dim now, the once blazing hues of gold, green, blue, and red, fading into a single soft white. Yet within that whiteness, something pulsed, a living rhythm steady and warm, like a heart that had finally learned to rest. Behind her, the door creaked open. Harry stepped out quietly, his hair tousled by the wind. He stood beside her for a moment without speaking. "It's quiet," he said at last. Hermione nodded. "The silence is gone. We're sleeping. The seal holds again." Harry glanced at her, but not forever. "No," she said softly. "Nothing lasts forever. Balance isn't something you achieve and keep. It's something you fight for. Every day." They stood in silence a while longer. Below, the first students of the new term crossed the courtyard, their laughter faint but bright. It felt strange, after so much turmoil, to see life return so easily. Yet perhaps that was what Hogwarts had always been, a place where hope rebuilt itself from the ashes of battle. Ron joined them soon after, carrying 3 steaming mugs of tea from the kitchens. "Thought you might both use this," he said, handing one to Hermione. She smiled faintly. "You always know when tea is necessary." "Comes from being married to a witch who never sits still," he said with a grin. "You pick up survival instincts." They drank quietly, watching the sun climb higher. The warmth began to seep into Hermione's bones, easing a tension she hadn't realized she was still carrying. For the first time since finding the pendant, she allowed herself to breathe fully. But beneath her calm, something tugged at the edges of her thoughts. A whisper, not dark but insistent, lingered in her mind, as though the relic's voice had not completely faded. "Guardian," it seemed to murmur. The circle turns again. Hermione frowned slightly. "Did either of you hear that?" Harry shook his head. "Hear what?" "Nothing," she said quickly, though her heart beat faster. They left the tower soon after, descending into the great hall. Breakfast was in full swing, and the hum of chatter was soothing. Students clustered around the long tables, the smell of toast and pumpkin juice filling the air. Professors moved between them, smiling more freely than they had in weeks. Even McGonagall seemed to have shed her usual sternness for a moment of quiet pride. Yet as Hermione walked toward the high table, The pendant warmed again against her chest. She paused. For a fleeting instant, the hall blurred, the laughter fading, the candles dimming. The walls shimmered, and she saw not the present but the past, the founders themselves standing together where she now stood. Helga, serene and kind. Rowena's sharp eyes softened by a faint smile, Godric's bold laughter echoing through the hall, and Salazar, standing slightly apart yet watching them with guarded fondness. They looked young, vivid, alive. Then Helga turned her gaze toward Hermione. "You've done well," she said, her voice both gentle and strong. "But the balance you restored must live through others. Do not carry it alone." Hermione tried to speak, but her voice caught in her throat. Rowena's image tilted her head. "Knowledge grows when it is shared." Godric smiled. "Courage is not in the grand act, but in the quiet choice to continue." And Salazar, eyes gleaming like emerald flame, added softly, "Power, tempered by mercy, is the rarest form of strength." The vision shimmered, fading like mist. When the hall returned to normal, Hermione found herself gripping the edge of the table, breathless. Harry was at her side instantly. "You all right?" "Yes," she whispered. "Just remembering something that hasn't happened yet." He frowned but didn't press. He had learned long ago that with Hermione, time and meaning didn't always move in straight lines. Later that day, she walked alone along the shores of the Black Lake. The reflection of the castle rippled across the water's surface, and the autumn wind carried the scent of leaves and rain. She knelt by the edge and let her fingers brush the water. "Will you ever be quiet again?" she murmured to the pendant. It glowed faintly in answer. "Only when you are." Hermione laughed softly. "Then we might be at this for quite a while." Behind her, footsteps approached. She turned to see Luna Lovegood, her pale hair shining in the sunlight, a small satchel slung over her shoulder. "I thought I might find you here," Luna said in her dreamy way. "You always come to the lake when you're thinking about impossible things." Hermione smiled. "You're not wrong. Though I'd rather think of them as improbable. The difference depends on whether you've already done them, doesn't it?" Hermione considered that. "Perhaps it does." They stood together for a time, watching the light shift across the water. Then Luna spoke again, her tone quieter. "The balance isn't just magic, It's people, choices, the way we look at each other. If the world feels steadier now, it's because you believed it could be." Hermione looked down at the pendant. The faint white glow pulsed softly, almost like agreement. "Maybe. But I think it's more than me. The founders, the relics, all of us, they're part of the same story. We keep writing it every day we choose to stand on the side of light." Luna smiled, her eyes bright as glass. "Then keep writing, Hermione. The world still needs stories." When Luna left, the wind carried her laughter across the water. Hermione stayed a while longer, the sun warm on her face, until the shadows lengthened across the lake. Then she rose, brushing the damp from her hands, and turned back toward the castle. As she crossed the lawns, she thought of the past months, the relics, the trials, the terrible beauty of the magic she had faced. None of it felt real now, yet she knew the world had shifted because of it. Somewhere deep beneath Hogwarts, the silence slept, bound once more by light and will, and above it all, the castle hummed softly, a melody of balance renewed. When Hermione reached the great doors, she paused. The pendant glowed again, faint but certain, its voice a whisper in her heart. "Guard it well, Hermione Granger, For as long as there is magic, there will be need of balance. She smiled, her fingers closing gently around it. Then I will. The doors swung open, and she stepped inside, where warmth and laughter awaited her. For though her trials were done, the story was not over. Magic, like the heart that bore it, and so long as courage, kindness, wisdom, and ambition endured, the world would remain in balance, ever fragile, ever precious, ever worth protecting. Outside, the last of the storm clouds drifted away, and dawn's light touched the castle once more. Weeks passed, and Hogwarts seemed to breathe again. The air grew soft with autumn's gold, the scent of fallen leaves and candle smoke mingling through the corridors. Classes resumed their rhythm. Laughter once more filled the courtyards where shadow had lingered. To most, the storm was over, the strange tremors and flickering magic forgotten like a fading dream. But Hermione Granger knew better. For her, the relic's pulse still beat faintly against her heart, a whisper of power and memory that refused to fade. The pendant had quieted, yes, but it had not grown still. She could sense it living within her, like a second heartbeat bound to the rhythm of the world itself. Each morning she awoke before dawn, walking the silent halls. She would pause at the entrance to the great hall, where sunlight filtered through the tall windows, painting the floor in bands of gold and crimson. There, she always felt the founders most keenly, four distinct presences watching, waiting. Sometimes, when the light touched her pendant just so, she thought she heard them breathe. By day she worked beside McGonagall to strengthen Hogwarts wards. It was delicate work. The castle's enchantments had grown old and tangled, like roots in an ancient forest. Together they wove new protections into the stone, fusing the ancient runes of the founders with the subtle intricacy of modern spellcraft. At night she studied. Her chambers overflowed with scrolls and half-burned candles, pages filled with runes that pulsed when her quill brushed them. The history of the founders stretched before her like an unending tapestry, and she meant to read every thread. Harry visited sometimes, bringing her tea, and Ron came less often, his own life now divided between family and the Auror office. But when he did, he always left her laughing, even when she didn't mean to. It was on one such evening, as rain drummed against the windows, that Harry found her hunched over the desk, quill scratching furiously. "Still chasing ghosts?" he asked gently. Hermione looked up, her eyes bright but tired. Not ghosts, patterns. The founders didn't just bind the silence. They built cycles into their magic. Periods when the seal weakens, when the world itself shifts. We're safe for now, but another turning will come, decades from now. Maybe sooner. Harry leaned against the desk. You can't spend your life preparing for what might happen. You've done enough. She gave a faint smile. That's what you said after the war. And I was right then too. He folded his arms, studying her. You've given the world balance again. Maybe it's time to live in it. Hermione set her quill down. For a moment, silence stretched between them, soft and full, like the pause between heartbeats. I don't know how, she admitted quietly. After so long fighting, it feels unnatural to stop. Harry smiled, a little sadly. Then start small. Take a walk. Read a book that isn't about ancient curses. Go home once in a while. Her gaze drifted to the window where the rain had turned to mist. Perhaps. That night she dreamt of the founders again. They stood in a circle of light surrounded by endless stars. Helga's voice was kind as always. You cannot bind the world by will alone, child. You must trust it to find its own way. Rowena inclined her head. Wisdom lies in knowing when to guide and when to let go. Salazar's tone was quiet but steady. Even serpents shed their skin. Let the old magic rest. And Godric, smiling that fierce, reckless smile, said only, "Live, Hermione Granger. That is the bravest spell of all." She awoke with tears on her cheeks, and the dawn's spilling days grew shorter as autumn deepened. One crisp morning, Hermione stood on the edge of the forbidden forest, the air alive with the scent of pine and rain. She had come to walk alone, her wand held loosely in her hand, the pendant tucked beneath her cloak. The forest whispered around her. Leaves fell like soft embers. Somewhere far off she heard the echo of a centaur's hooves, the cry of an owl, the hum of life, older than any enchantment. And for the first time, she felt not the weight of her duty, but the rhythm of something greater, the quiet heartbeat of the world itself, steady and whole. As she turned to leave, the pendant warmed faintly against her chest. She lifted it into the light. The white glow that had once pulsed so fiercely now shimmered softly, like the gleam of moonlight on water. "You've changed," she murmured, "or perhaps I have." A faint voice answered from within, a whisper so gentle it might have been her own thought. "Balance is never still. It moves with those who keep it." She smiled, her breath misting in the cold air. "Then I'll keep it well." Winter crept in quietly after that. Snow blanketed the grounds, muffling the world in soft white silence. Hermione spent Christmas at the Burrow with Ron and his family. Laughter filled every corner of the crooked house. For once she allowed herself to be part of it, to listen instead of analyze, to rest instead of lead. When she returned to Hogwarts in the new year, she found peace waiting there, not as a gift, but as a choice. The castle's great halls gleamed with candlelight. The portraits of the founders watched her from the walls. 4 faces eternal, painted in color and pride. And though they spoke no words, she felt their presence in every stone, every flicker of flame. That night she stood once more in the underground chamber where the relics had been bound. The molten pool lay still, its light soft as dawn. She held the pendant out above it. May the world hold steady a little longer. She laid the relic gently upon the stone, and its glow sank into the pool, merging with the ancient enchantments. For a moment, the whole chamber shimmered with light, the 4 colors intertwining, fading, and finally settling into calm white. The balance was whole again. Hermione turned away, her steps light upon the ancient stairs. She emerged into the moonlit courtyard, the winter air sharp and clear. Snowflakes drifted through the darkness, each one glimmering as it fell. As she crossed the grounds, the bells of Hogwarts began to ring. Their sound rolled across the hills, deep and resonant, echoing over the lake and through the forest beyond. It was not the sound of warning or battle, but of peace. Hermione paused by the gates and looked back once, the castle shining behind her. "Good night," she whispered, and for the first time in a long while her heart felt unburdened. The snow fell thicker now, veiling the world in white, and beneath that quiet sky, with the relics resting in harmony and the silence once more subdued, the guardian of balance walked away, not as a warrior nor a savior, but as a woman at last free to live. Far beneath the earth, deep within the pool of ancient light, the pendant pulsed once, a single heartbeat, calm and sure. Then it, too, was still. And so ended the tale of Hermione Granger and the enchanted gift, a story of courage, of wisdom, of friendship, and of the quiet strength that keeps even the greatest magic